If I told you that one search bar broke a woman's heart in front of me, and that woman was a stranger I had known for only 11 minutes, would you believe me? Before I tell you what I typed into that computer at 28 years old, the first time in my whole life I had ever touched such a thing, I need you to do something for me. Press that like button right now, right where your thumb already is. Type in the comment box below and tell me what town, what city, what corner of this earth you are watching from. Because I want to know how far these words have traveled to reach you. And if you are new here, subscribe, because I have many more stories like this one, stories from a life most of you have never lived. And I promise you, this one is going to sit with you long after it ends. Now. Let me take you back. My name is Miriam. I was born in a farmhouse with no electric lights, delivered by a midwife who also delivered my mother, in a bedroom that smelled like beeswax and wood smoke. I did not see a television until I was nearly 40, and even then it was through the window of an English neighbor's house, and I looked away out of habit before I even understood what I was looking at. I grew up milking cows before the sun came up, canning peaches until my hands ached, and sitting through 3-hour church services on backless benches, and I would not trade a single year of it, not one single year, even knowing everything I know now. But there is a day in my life, a Tuesday, that split my whole existence into a before and an after, the way a knife splits a loaf of bread, clean and quiet and impossible to undo. That Tuesday, I was 28 years old, and I walked into a public library for the first time, and I asked a stranger to show me how to use something called a search engine. And what I typed into that little glowing box made a woman I had just met put her hand over her mouth and cry. I want to tell you this story slowly, the way we tell stories back home, sitting on the porch after supper with the crickets going and the last light draining out of the sky. Not because I think you have nowhere else to be, but because some stories lose their weight if you rush them. And this one, I promise you, deserves to be carried carefully. I grew up in a settlement in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Though I will not tell you the exact district, because some things are still not mine to hand out to strangers on the internet, even now, even after everything. My father was Daniel Yoder, a quiet man with hands like tree roots, who farmed corn and tobacco and raised standard-bred horses on the side, the kind used for harness racing, though of course we never raced them ourselves. That would not have been our way. My mother was Anna, and she ran that house like a small nation, up before dawn, bread rising on the counter, 6 children under one roof, and somehow a supper on the table every single night at 5:30, no matter what the day had thrown at her. I was the 4th of 6. Above me were my brothers Eli and Samuel, and my older sister Sarah, who is the reason I am telling you this story at all. Below me were my younger sister Katie, and my baby brother John. We grew up close the way farm children do, not because we chose each other exactly, but because there was simply no one else around for miles, and so you learned to love the people God put in the next bed over, whether you felt like it that day or not. Sarah and I were only 14 months apart, and for the first 17 years of my life, she was more like the other half of me than a separate person. We shared a bed until we were both nearly grown. We shared secrets in the dark that we never told our mother. We shared the same nervous laugh, the kind that came out in church when we were not supposed to laugh at all, and we would have to bite the insides of our cheeks until they bled just to keep quiet. Sarah was braver than me in every way that mattered. She asked the questions I only thought. She wondered out loud about the English world, the world outside our fences. in a way that made our mother's mouth go tight and thin. When Sarah turned 16, she went into her Rumspringa, that season of running around that some of you have heard about from television shows that get almost everything wrong. For us, it was not wild the way people imagine. It was simply a window, a narrow window, where the rules loosened just enough for a young person to taste the outside world before choosing, with open eyes, whether to be baptized into the church for good. Most young people in our community go through that window and come back through it again, gladly, having tasted enough to know home is where they want to stay. Sarah did not come back through. I remember the night she left like I remember my own name. She did not run off in secret the way some do. She sat at our kitchen table with our father across from her, and she told him, in a voice so steady, it frightened me more than tears would have, that she could not promise the rest of her life to a set of rules she did not believe in her heart. She told him she loved us. She told him this was not about hating anyone. She told him she was 18 years old, and she wanted to see a college classroom and ride in an airplane and know what her own unmarried voice sounded like when it was not asking permission first. My father did not shout. That was not his way. He simply nodded once, like a man accepting a diagnosis, and he told her that the door of that house would always be open to her, but that once she was baptized under the world's rules instead of ours, some things between us would have to change, because that is our way. That is the Ordnung, the order we live by, and it is not cruelty. Though I know it looks like cruelty from where you are sitting. It is a fence meant to keep a community whole, even when it costs the community people we love. Sarah left 3 days later with one suitcase and a cousin who was going to a technical school in Harrisburg. I stood in the yard and watched the car pull away down our long gravel lane, dust rising behind it like a small brown storm. And I did not cry, because crying in front of my mother that day would have broken something in her that I did not think could be put back together. I cried 3 hours later, alone, in the hayloft, into a horse blanket that still smelled like Sarah's hair oil. I should tell you a little more about what our childhood actually looked like, so that you understand exactly what kind of silence swallowed my sister, and exactly what kind of world I was stepping out of the day I walked into that library. We rose before light, every one of us, because a farm does not care what hour your body would prefer to wake at. My mother would already have the stove going by the time my bare feet hit the cold floorboards, and the whole house would smell like coffee and wood smoke, and on baking days, like bread just starting to brown. We did not have electricity running through wires the way English homes do. We had gas lamps, and later propane appliances that our bishop had permitted, and candles for the smallest rooms. And I want you to understand, it never once felt to me like a life of lack. It felt, most days, like a life of rhythm, of knowing exactly what each hour was for, which is a kind of peace I have never quite found anywhere else since. Not even now, with all the conveniences of the world sitting in my kitchen. School for us ended at the 8th grade, as it does for most Amish children. Not because we are forbidden from learning, but because our community believes a young person's real education, the kind that matters for the life we're meant to live, happens best in the fields and the kitchen and the barn, under the patient instruction of parents and elders, rather than behind a desk. Sarah hated that rule more than any of the rest of us ever did. I remember her, 12 years old, sitting on the porch steps with our one shared arithmetic book, long after the teacher had said she could stop, working through problems nobody had assigned her, simply because some hunger in her had not yet been fed. I did not understand that hunger back then. I understand it now, looking back, as the very first sign of the road she would eventually walk. For the first 2 years, we had letters, real letters, on real paper, mailed to a cousin's address because we did not want our own mailbox filling up with something my father would have to explain to the bishop. Sarah wrote about her classes, about a diner where she worked nights, about a roommate named Dana who taught her to drive a stick shift. I wrote back about the harvest, about which horse had thrown a shoe, about how baby John had learned to whistle. We were performing a kind of magic trick, the two of us, pretending the miles between us were nothing more than the length of our old shared bed. Then the letters slowed, then they stopped. I do not blame her for that, not anymore, though for years I did blame her, quietly, in the part of my heart I did not let anyone see. Building a whole new life takes both hands and both eyes, all the time. And I think somewhere in the middle of nursing school and new friends and a world that must have felt like it was moving at the speed of a runaway horse. The old world, our world, the slow world of horse and buggy and oil lamp, must have started to feel like a photograph from someone else's life rather than a door she could still walk back through. The last letter came when I was 21. Sarah wrote that she had finished her nursing degree, that she was working at a hospital in a city I had never heard of, that she was proud of herself in a way she did not know how to say out loud to a family who did not entirely approve of pride. She wrote that she loved us. She wrote that she was sorry the letters had gotten so few and far between. She wrote that she would write again soon. She never did. For 7 years, I did not know if my sister was alive or dead. I want you to sit with that sentence for one moment, because I think in your world, the world with telephones, in every pocket, and a person's whole life laid open on a screen, that sentence sounds almost impossible. But that is what it means to live the way we live. It means that someone you love more than your own right hand can simply become unreachable. Not because anyone did anything wrong exactly, but because the fences that keep a community strong are the same fences that can quietly, slowly, without anyone ever raising their voice, swallow a person whole. My mother prayed for Sarah every single night at the supper table, out loud, in our dialect, asking God to keep her safe and to soften her heart toward home. My father never spoke her name at all after the 3rd year. Not out of anger, I came to understand later, but because grief for him was a thing that had to be carried in silence, or it would not be carried at all. I was the one who kept a small tin box under a floorboard in my room, with Sarah's old letters inside, and I would take it out sometimes on nights when the house was asleep, and read her handwriting just to remember the exact shape her letters made, because I was terrified that one day I would forget even that. By the time I was 28, I had accepted, in the tired way you accept whether you cannot change, that Sarah was simply gone from my life, the way a river changes course and leaves an old bed dry. I was not married yet, which in our community at 28 was starting to draw the kind of gentle, well-meaning questions that wear a person down more than outright unkindness ever could. I helped run our household since my mother's hip had started giving her trouble. I taught the younger children their letters and their sums in our one-room schoolhouse 3 days a week. My life was full and steady and mine, and I want to be honest with you. Most days it was a good life, a life I was grateful for. But there was a hollow place inside me shaped exactly like my sister, and no amount of canning peaches or teaching sums ever quite filled it in. Then, in the autumn of that year, my father's heart began to fail him. It started small. He would come in from the barn out of breath in a way he never used to be. He would press his hand flat against his chest at the supper table and say nothing. Just breathe slow until it passed, and pretend he had not done it at all. My mother noticed before any of us, the way mothers do. And after weeks of him waving away her worry, she finally put her foot down in that quiet, immovable way of hers, and told him he was going to see the doctor whether he liked it or not. The English doctor in town, a kind man named Dr. Reinhold, who had treated half our community for 20 years, told my father that his heart had a rhythm problem, something with a long, complicated name I could not have spelled if you had paid me, and that there was a newer treatment, still fairly recent, that had shown real promise for men his age with his exact condition. He said it was not something he could hand my father a pamphlet about, right there in the office. He said, and I remember this exactly, "There's more information on this than I can give you in 20 minutes, Daniel. If you had someone who could look it up properly, on the internet, there are patient studies, there are support groups, there's real detail out there that could help you understand your choices." My father, of course, had no internet, would have no internet, would never in his life sit down in front of a glowing screen himself. That was simply not who he was. But he looked at me across the buggy on the ride home, and he said in his quiet way, "Miriam, maybe you go into town, ask at the library, see what this doctor is talking about." I want you to understand what a strange sentence that was for a man like my father to say. My father, who had never once in his life encouraged any of his children toward anything modern, was asking me, his unmarried 28-year-old daughter, to walk into a public library and use the machine that the whole outside world seemed to be built around now, for his sake, because he was frightened for his own heart and would do almost anything to understand what was happening inside his own chest. So the following Tuesday, I hitched our buggy horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Duke, who had pulled that same buggy for 11 years, and I drove the 4 miles into town by myself, my stomach in a knot the whole way, past the English houses with their satellite dishes and their sprinklers running on lawns nobody was even standing on, until I reached the small brick library at the edge of the square. The same building I had walked past 100 times in my life and never once gone inside. I tied Duke to a post at the edge of the parking lot, out of the way of the cars, and I stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, just looking up at the glass doors, feeling like a woman standing at the edge of a pond she is not sure will hold her weight. Inside, the library smelled like old paper and carpet cleaner, and it was quieter than I expected, quieter almost than our own farmhouse on a Sunday afternoon. Rows and rows of books stretched back farther than I could see, more books in one room than I think I had seen in my whole life up to that point. And toward the back, along one wall, sat a row of glowing screens, 6 or 7 of them, with people sitting in front of them typing, their faces lit up pale blue, like something out of a dream I would never have thought to dream on my own. I stood there long enough that a woman noticed me. She came around from behind a tall wooden desk, an older woman, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back and reading glasses pushed up on top of her head, and kind eyes, the kind of eyes that had clearly spent 40 years watching frightened, lost people walk through that door and had learned exactly how to put them at ease. Her name tag said, Louise. "First time in?" she asked me gently, the way you would ask a spooked animal if it wanted an apple. Yes, I said. I'm sorry to bother you. You're not bothering me one bit, she said. That's the whole reason I'm here. What can I help you find? I told her, as plainly as I could, without giving away more of our private life than I meant to, that my father was sick, that the doctor had mentioned there was information about his condition on the internet, and that I had never in my life used a computer and did not know the first thing about how to begin. Louise's face did something soft when I said that. Not pity exactly. More like she had just been handed something fragile and wanted to be sure she held it correctly. Well, she said, you've come to the right place, and you've got all the time in the world today. Let's go sit down. She led me to one of the computers at the end of the row, pulled out the chair for me herself, and sat down in the one right beside it. She talked me through everything, the way you would talk a small child through their first steps, patient, unhurried, never once making me feel foolish for not knowing what a mouse was, or why the screen had so many little pictures scattered across it, or what it meant when she said the word browser, which to me, until that day, was only a word that described a cow standing in a pasture eating grass at its leisure. She showed me how to move the little arrow across the screen. She showed me how the keys made letters appear. She opened something called a search engine, a plain white page with a long empty box in the middle of it. And she said the words that I think about, still, all these years later, more than almost any other word spoken to me in my whole life. This box, she said, tapping the screen gently. You can type anything into it. Anything at all. A question, a name, a place, a feeling even. And it will try to find you an answer. It's not magic. It's just a very, very big library. Bigger than this one, bigger than every library in the world put together. And it is asking you right now what you want to know. Before that box even appeared on the screen, Louise had spent a good 20 minutes simply teaching me the shape of the thing in front of me. She showed me the little arrow that followed the small plastic mouse under my hand, and I laughed, the first real laugh I had let out all day, when I moved my hand too fast and watched the arrow go skating clean off the edge of the screen. She showed me how the machine did not need to be coaxed the way a stubborn plow horse does, that it simply waited, patiently, for whatever I decided to ask of it. She showed me a page with moving pictures on it, just to prove to me that such a thing existed. And I sat back in my chair the way you would sit back from a fire that had suddenly leapt higher than you expected. She showed me how letters could be typed larger or smaller, how a whole page of writing could disappear and reappear at the press of a single key. And every single thing she showed me felt, at the time, like its own small miracle, though I had no way of knowing yet that the largest miracle of that entire day was still waiting, quietly, inside that empty search box. I sat there with my hands in my lap for a long moment, staring at that blinking little line in the empty box, and Louise waited beside me without a single word of impatience. And I understood, in that moment, that I was standing at the edge of something enormous, a door that once opened, I did not think I would ever be able to fully close again. I had come there for my father. I want you to remember that. I had climbed into that buggy that morning with one single purpose in my heart, to learn about heart rhythms and treatments, so I could bring the information home to a frightened old man who had never asked me for help with anything modern before in his whole life. But my hands did not go to the keyboard to type about hearts. I do not fully know even now, all these years later, why in that exact moment with this kind stranger sitting beside me, and an entire world of information waiting behind that little blinking line. The thing that rose up inside me was not my father's illness at all, but the 7-year-old hollow-shaped like my sister. Maybe it was that the box itself seemed to be asking me the one true question I had been carrying, unspoken, for 7 years. Maybe some part of me understood, without being able to say it in words, that this might be my only chance, my only door, and that if I did not walk through it right then, sitting beside this stranger who would not judge me, I might never gather the courage again. My hands were shaking a little as I found the letters, one by one, the way you find your footing crossing a creek on wet stones. Louise did not rush me. She simply watched the screen fill, slow letter by slow letter, with the only question that had truly been living inside me for 7 long years. I typed my sister's full name, Sarah Yoder. And then, because I did not know if there might be many women in this world who shared her name, and because some small, aching, hopeful part of me needed more than just a name, I added the city where her very last letter had been mailed from all those years ago, the return address I had memorized without ever meaning to, from staring at that tin box under my floorboard so many nights. I pressed the button that Louise had shown me, the one that sends the question out into that enormous, invisible library, and the screen changed. I remember the exact silence of that moment, the hum of the other computers along the row, somebody's cart of books rolling past behind us, my own heartbeat, suddenly very loud in my own ears, the way it gets loud right before you know something is about to change you. The screen filled with a list, blue words stacked one on top of another, and Louise leaned in slightly beside me, the way anyone would, simply to help me understand what I was looking at, since I did not yet know how to read a page like that on my own. And then I saw her stop. I saw Louise's whole body go still beside me, the way a deer goes still in a field a half second before it decides whether to run. Her eyes had caught on something on that screen, a fraction of a second before. Mine had because her eyes already knew, from decades of practice, exactly where on a page like that the important words usually sit. "Oh," she said very quietly, almost like the word escaped her instead of being spoken on purpose. "Oh, honey." I looked at where her finger was pointing, trembling slightly, at a single line near the top of that list of blue words. It was not a phone number. It was not an address. It was a notice from a newspaper in the city where Sarah had once lived, dated a little over 2 years earlier. It was my sister's obituary. I did not understand at first what I was looking at. I had never seen the word laid out like that before, formatted so plainly, so matter-of-fact, sandwiched between an advertisement for a car dealership and a notice about a church rummage sale, as if the ending of an entire human life could sit quietly on a page next to something so small and ordinary. Louise had to click on it for me, her hand covering mine gently on the mouse, because my own fingers had simply stopped working. The page that opened had a photograph. I had not seen my sister's face in 7 years, not since she was 21 years old, standing in our kitchen doorway with one suitcase and a look on her face I did not yet understand was goodbye. The photograph on that screen showed a woman in her late 20s, hair cut short and modern, wearing a set of pale blue scrubs, standing in front of a hospital with her arm around another woman I did not recognize, both of them laughing at something outside the frame of the picture. She looked so happy. That is the thing that undid me first, before the words even fully landed. She looked so happy, and so whole, and so entirely herself, a self I had never gotten to meet, A self that had grown and changed and built an entire life 2 years before. I even knew to look for her. And then had ended quietly, somewhere far away from all of us, without a single one of her own family standing beside her. Sarah Yoder, the notice said, formerly of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, had passed away at the age of 26 following a short illness at the hospital where she worked as a registered nurse. She was remembered by her colleagues as compassionate, dedicated, and endlessly kind to her patients, especially the frightened ones, the ones nobody else quite knew how to sit with. She was survived, the notice said, by a wide circle of friends and co-workers who considered her family. It did not mention us at all. Not our father, not our mother, not one single brother or sister by name. Because how could it? The world she had built for herself did not know we existed. Not really. Not as anything more than a story she must have told sometimes, quietly, to people she trusted, about a life she had once lived and left behind. I do not remember making any sound. Louise told me later that I did not cry out, did not gasp, did not do any of the things she said she usually braced herself for in moments like that. She said I simply went very still and very pale, and my hand stayed frozen on the edge of the desk, and I read the notice 3 times through without moving, as if reading it a 4th time might change a single word of it. What I do remember, with perfect clarity, is turning my head to look at Louise, because some part of me needed another human face in that moment more than I needed anything else in the entire world, and finding that Louise was already crying. Not politely, not the composed, professional tears of someone simply being kind to a stranger in distress. Real tears, sudden ones, rolling down over her reading glasses, one hand pressed flat over her mouth, exactly the way I had pressed my own hand over mine a moment before without realizing it. I knew her, Louise said, when she could finally speak. Her voice came out cracked down the middle. I knew your sister. I did not understand at first. I thought perhaps she meant she recognized the name from the news, from some story that had passed through the community years before. But Louise shook her head, wiping under her glasses with the back of her wrist, and told me the rest, in pieces, between breaths that kept catching in her throat. Sarah had lived in this town, our town, for almost a year, before she moved on to the city where she eventually became a nurse. She had come into this very library, Louise said, almost every week that whole year, first to use the very same computers I was sitting at right then, to fill out school applications, to write essays, to search for scholarships that a girl with no formal education past the 8th grade should not, by all conventional wisdom, have had any hope of winning. Louise had helped her, had sat beside her at this same desk, had helped her format her very first college application, had watched her hands shake with the exact same fear mine had shaken with only minutes before. And somewhere in that year, Sarah had told her things. Small things at first, and then larger ones. The way you do with someone who has shown you patience, and no judgment at all. She had told Louise about a family of 6 children on a farm in Lancaster County, about a mother who prayed out loud at supper, about a father whose silence, Sarah had said, was its own kind of love letter, even when it felt like punishment. She had told Louise more than once about a younger sister named Miriam, 14 months behind her, who she said was braver than anyone gave her credit for, and funnier than she let people see, and who she missed. Louise said every single day, in a way that never seemed to get smaller no matter how many new things filled up her new life. She talked about you all the time, Louise said, and here her voice broke fully apart. She said she was going to write again. Every single week for that whole year she'd tell me, "Next week, I'm going to sit down and write my sister a real letter, tell her everything." And then the semester would get hard, or a shift at the hospital would run long, or she'd just lose her nerve, I think. Scared of what she'd say. Scared it wasn't enough after so much silence. She talked about you like a promise she kept meaning to keep. I sat there in that library chair with my sister's face still glowing on the screen in front of me. And I understood all at once, a truth so large it nearly knocked the wind out of me, sitting still. My sister had not forgotten us. My sister had not simply drifted away the way a leaf drifts down a river, careless and unthinking. My sister had carried us with her every single day, had spoken of us to a stranger with love in her voice so many times that the stranger had memorized our names, and had meant, again and again, to build the bridge back home, and had simply run out of time before she found the courage. And I had spent 7 years believing the hollow place inside me was proof that she had stopped loving us. Louise reached over and took my hand right there at that desk. This woman I had known for perhaps 15 minutes total, and she held it the way you hold the hand of someone standing at the edge of a very great grief, firm enough to remind them the ground is still there, gentle enough not to add one more weight to what they are already carrying. "I am so sorry," she said. "I am so sorry nobody ever thought to find you. I didn't know how. I didn't have an address. I didn't even know your last name for certain until just now. I've thought about her so many times these past 2 years and wondered about the family she talked about. And I never once thought I'd meet one of you sitting right here at this same desk." We sat together for a long while after that, Louise and I, 2 strangers bound together in the space of a single afternoon by a grief that belonged, in its rawest form, only to me, but that she had clearly been quietly carrying pieces of for 2 years all on her own, with nowhere to set it down. She told me stories, small ones, Sarah laughing so hard at a mispronounced word in a textbook that she had to put her head down on this very desk. Sarah bringing in a pie she'd baked from a recipe she said was our mother's, apologizing that it wasn't quite right because the oven was different. Sarah crying once quietly in the back corner by the biography section on the anniversary of the day she left home, and Louise sitting with her without asking why. Because some things a person will tell you when they are ready, and not one moment before. I want to be honest with you about something. Sitting there learning all of this, I felt many things at once, and grief was only one of them, though it was the largest. I felt a strange, aching gratitude, too, that this stranger had loved my sister in the years I could not reach her, had been there for the parts of her life our family's fences had made impossible for us to witness. And underneath all of it, quiet but unmistakable, I felt something close to anger, not at Sarah, and not really at Louise, but at distance itself, at silence itself, at every fence built with good intentions that had still somehow managed to keep a dying young woman from her own mother's arms. Louise printed the obituary for me on the library's printer before I left that day, her hand still not quite steady, and she wrote her own name and the library's telephone number on the back of it in careful cursive, and told me that if my family ever wanted to know more, wanted to hear more stories, wanted anything at all that she could give, the door of that library and the door of her own heart would always be open. She said it the exact way my father had said it to Sarah all those years ago at our kitchen table, that the door would always be open. And I remember thinking, through my tears, How strange and how holy it was that the same words meant to keep a fence standing had somehow also become the words a stranger used to build a bridge. I never did look up my father's heart condition that day. I want you to know that. I sat in that library for nearly 2 hours, and Louise, bless her, never once rushed me toward the door or reminded me of my original errand. When I finally did remember why I had come, my hands still trembling from what I'd found, Louise gently helped me search for my father's condition too, printed several pages for him in plain, clear language, and folded them carefully together with Sarah's obituary into one single stack, as if she understood, without my saying it, that both pieces of paper belonged to the same story now, the story of a family trying, in its own perfect way, to hold on to the people it loved. The ride home that evening felt longer than the 4 miles it actually was. Duke walked steady and unbothered beneath me, the way horses do, entirely unaware that the woman holding his reins had just had her whole understanding of the last 7 years of her life rearranged. I remember the sky that evening, streaked orange and purple over the tobacco fields, the kind of sunset that would normally have filled me with nothing more complicated than simple, quiet gratitude. And instead it filled me with something enormous and unnamed, grief and love tangled together so tightly I could not have separated them if I tried. I did not know, driving home that evening, how I was going to tell my parents what I had found. I did not know if telling them was even the kind thing to do, or if some truths are better carried alone so they do not have to be carried by everyone. I turned it over and over in my mind the whole way home, the way you turn a stone over in your palm, looking for the smooth side. In the end, I told my mother first, alone, in the kitchen, after the younger children were in bed. I sat her down at the same table where Sarah had once told our father the truth about her own heart, and I put the printed obituary in front of her, and I watched my mother's face do the same thing Louise's had done, the same stillness, the same disbelief, and then the same collapse into grief. Except my mother's grief had 7 years of silent prayers folded into it, 7 years of asking God every single night at supper to soften a heart that, it turned out, had never once hardened at all, had simply run out of road before it could find its way home. My mother cried for a long time that night, and I held her the way she had held me as a child. And neither of us said very much, because there was nothing to say that the paper on the table had not already said far better than either of us could. My father took it differently. When I told him the next morning, out by the barn, in the gray early light, he did not cry, at least not where I could see it. He went very quiet, quieter even than his usual quiet, and he stood with his hand pressed flat against the wooden fence post for a long moment. And then he asked me one single question, in a voice I had never heard him use before. "Did she suffer?" he asked. "At the end? Was anyone with her?" And I was able to tell him, truthfully, because Louise had told me this part too, that Sarah had not been alone, that the friends she had built her whole new life around, the ones the obituary called family, though they shared no blood with her at all, had been at her bedside, that she had been loved fiercely and completely, right up until her very last breath, by people who never knew a single word of our dialect, who had never once sat through one of our long silent church services, but who had somehow understood exactly how to love my sister the way she needed to be loved. My father nodded slowly at that, and something in his shoulders loosened, just slightly, the way a fist loosens when it finally lets go of something it has been holding too tightly for too long. In the weeks that followed, something in our family changed that I do not think any of us could have predicted or fully explained, even to ourselves. We began quietly, carefully, to speak of Sarah again, at the supper table, in the barn, in the small moments between chores. My mother stopped praying for God to soften Sarah's heart toward home, and started thanking God instead for the years Sarah had gotten to live at all, for the people who had loved her when we could not, for the strange mercy hidden inside a story that had broken all our hearts. I went back to that library many times after that first day. Louise and I became, in the truest sense of the word, friends. An unlikely friendship between an old Amish woman's daughter and a public librarian who had loved my sister in the years I lost her. She taught me, slowly, patiently, over many visits, how to use that glowing box for more than just grief. She showed me how to look up my father's heart medications, how to find support groups of other families dealing with the very same condition, how to write, eventually, my very first email to a cousin of Sarah's friend Dana, the one who had taught her to drive a stick shift all those years ago. A woman who was overjoyed, and I mean overjoyed, to finally meet the family Sarah had spoken of so often and so lovingly. Through that email and the ones that followed, I learned so much more about the life my sister had built. I learned she had kept a small framed photograph of our old farmhouse on her nightstand her entire adult life. I learned she used to make our mother's chow chow recipe every single autumn and cried every single time she made it, and made it anyway, every year, because the crying felt closer to home than not making it at all. I learned that in her last year, sick as she was, she had started finally, writing us a letter, a real one, on paper, and that it was found unfinished in a drawer beside her hospital bed, 3 pages long, and that Dana had kept it safe all this time, waiting, hoping for exactly the moment when someone from our family might come looking. I have that letter still. I keep it now where the old tin box used to sit, under the same floorboard, though these days the floorboard sits beneath a house that looks very different than it did when I was 28, for reasons I will tell you about it another day, in another video, if you will have me back. About a year after that first Tuesday, Dana wrote back with a question I had not expected, and did not, at first, know how to answer. She asked if my mother and I would ever want to come and see the city where Sarah had spent her last years, to visit the small apartment she had shared with 2 roommates, to see the hospital where she had worked, and, if we could bear it, to visit the place where she was laid to rest. I sat with that question for many weeks before I brought it to my mother, turning it over the way I had once turned over the choice of whether to tell her about the obituary at all. In the end, it was my mother who decided for both of us, in her own steady way, saying simply that a mother ought to see where her child lived out the years she was not there to witness, however far that place might be, however strange the traveling might feel, to a woman who had never once in her life set foot on an airplane or a train beyond the borders of our own county. We did not fly, of course. My father hired a driver, an Englishman named Frank, who had taken our community on longer trips before, and my mother and I rode together in the back of his van for the better part of 2 days, watching a country roll past the windows that neither of us had ever seen with our own eyes, mountains and rivers and cities so large they seemed to swallow the whole sky in electric light after dark. I will confess to you I gripped my mother's hand through most of that first evening, driving through a city at night, both of us silent, both of us undone in our own quiet ways, by how enormous and how loud the world outside our fences truly was. Dana met us in the parking lot of a small brick apartment building, and I recognized her instantly from the photograph on the obituary, though she had aged the way 2 years of grief will age a person, a little more tired around the eyes than the laughing woman in that picture. She hugged my mother before either of them said a single word, the two of them standing there in that parking lot, holding on to each other and crying. Two women who had never once met, bound together completely by their love for the same lost young woman. Dana showed us Sarah's old room, still holding a few boxes of her things that nobody had yet had the heart to give away. And there, on the small dresser, exactly as Louise had told me, sat a simple wooden frame with a photograph of our old farmhouse inside it, the fields behind it gold with September corn. A photograph I recognized because I myself had taken it, years before, with an old box camera a cousin had let me borrow for a single afternoon. My mother held that photograph for a long time without speaking. Then she asked very quietly if she could keep it. And Donna said, of course, it belongs to your family. It always did. And I watched my mother press that small frame against her chest, the exact same way she used to hold each of us as infants, fresh from the midwife's hands, meeting us for the very first time. We visited the hospital too, where a whole ward of nurses who had never once met us before that day stopped their rounds to tell us stories about Sarah, about a patient she had once sat with through an entire night shift simply because the woman was frightened and alone, about the terrible jokes she told in the break room that made everyone groan and laugh at the same time, about the quiet, steady kindness she brought into a building full of people on some of the hardest days of their lives. I understood, standing in that hallway surrounded by strangers in scrubs, that my sister had not simply survived out in the English world. She had thrived there, had become exactly the woman I always suspected she had it in her to become, and had spent every single day of that thriving life pouring the very same kindness our mother had poured into all of us, back into strangers who needed it just as badly. We visited the cemetery last, on our final morning before Frank drove us home again. It was a small, plain place, nothing grand, rows of stones under a line of maple trees, just beginning to turn colors for the autumn. My mother knelt in the grass beside Sarah's stone for a long while, and I stood back and let her have that moment alone, the way I understood, without being told, that some griefs need to be met one-on-one, without even a beloved daughter standing too close beside you. When she finally rose, she looked older and younger at the very same time, the way grief sometimes does to a face. And she told me, on the ride home, that she felt, for the first time in 7 years, that she finally knew where her daughter was resting, instead of simply wandering endlessly into an empty and unanswering dark. People sometimes ask me when I tell this story, whether finding out what happened to Sarah made me question the life I had chosen, the fences I had grown up inside of, the whole world of horse and buggy and gas lamp that had kept us apart from her for those 7 long years. I want to answer that honestly, because I think a story like this one deserves an honest answer, more than it deserves a tidy one. The truth is, yes, for a season it did. I remember lying awake many nights in the months after that Tuesday, staring up at a ceiling I had stared up at my whole life, and wondering whether the very same fences that had given me such a steady, rhythmic, peaceful childhood had also been the thing that stole 7 years of my sister's life from me. 7 years I can never get back, no matter how many photographs Dana hands me, or how many stories the nurses at that hospital tell. I wondered whether love should ever come with rules attached at all. Whether a community however strong and however good, has the right to ask a family to go silent toward a daughter simply because she chose a different road than the one she was born walking? I do not think I have found a complete answer to that question even now, all these years later, and I am not sure a complete answer exists this side of heaven. But I have found something close to peace with it, and I want to share that peace with you, because I think it might be useful to you too, whatever fences exist in your own life, whether they are the kind built by a whole community or simply the kind built quietly, one small silence at a time, between two people who love each other and have simply stopped knowing how to say so. What I have come to believe is this: the fences themselves are not the villain in this story. My community's way of life, its rhythm, its rules, its quiet devotion, gave me a childhood I would not trade for anything, and gave my parents a marriage of 51 years built on a steadiness the English world, with all its speed and all its choices, does not always manage to protect. But I have also come to believe that no fence, however wise, however well-intentioned, should ever be allowed to fully replace a family's own judgment about when to reach for a person they love. Sarah's letters slowing down were not the fence's fault. Not really. They were simply what happens in any family, in any world, Amish or English or anything in between. When two people on opposite sides of a great distance both wait for the other one to write first, both grow a little more afraid with each passing year of what the silence might mean, until the silence itself becomes its own wall, taller and colder than any fence the church ever built. I have tried since that Tuesday to be a different kind of person around silence. When my younger brother John chose, some years later, to leave for a season himself, testing his own Rumspringer, the way Sarah once tested hers, I did not let 7 years pass without a single letter. I wrote him every single month, whether he wrote back or not, small ordinary letters about the weather and the harvest and which horse had thrown a shoe, because I had learned, at the cost of my sister's whole, unlived second half of life, that ordinary letters are sometimes the only rope keeping two people tied to each other across a widening water. John did come back eventually, and was baptized, and is raising his own children, not 2 miles from where I sit, typing this into a computer that still, some days, feels like a small miracle sitting quietly on my desk. But even if he had not come back, even if he had built a whole new life the way Sarah did, I like to think those letters would have kept the door between us open the whole way through, instead of leaving him to wonder, the way I once wondered, whether love back home had simply run out of road. I think about that Tuesday more than almost any other day of my life. I think about how strange it is that the very same fingers that had never once touched a keyboard before that afternoon typed the words that finally, after 7 long years, brought my sister home to us, not in body, but in truth, in story, in the enormous, aching relief of finally knowing, instead of forever wondering. I did not go looking for grief that day. I went looking, if I am honest with you, for hope, the small, quiet hope of a woman who had spent 7 years wondering if she still had a sister in this world at all. What I found instead was an ending. But I have come to believe, in the years since, that an ending you finally know the shape of is a kinder thing to carry than a silence that never resolves, a silence that keeps you wondering every single day whether the person you love is out there somewhere thinking of you too, or whether they have simply stopped. Louise still works at that library, though she is much closer to retirement now than she was that Tuesday all those years ago. I visit her still, more often than you might expect from a woman who lives the kind of life I live. She keeps on a small shelf behind her desk, tucked between two books she says she will get around to reading one day, a photograph of Sarah, the very same one from the obituary, laughing outside that hospital with her arm around a friend, and beside it now, a photograph of me, taken at my own wedding some years later, in a plain blue dress, standing beside a good, quiet man named Amos, who has never once made me feel foolish for the tears I still sometimes cry over a sister he never got to meet. If you are watching this and you have someone in your life that silence has swallowed, someone offense or a distance or simple fear has kept you from reaching, I want to tell you what that Tuesday taught me. In the plainest words I know how to say it, do not wait for the courage to feel comfortable. It will not ever feel comfortable. I sat in that chair with my hands shaking, terrified of what I might find, and I typed the question anyway, because the not knowing had already been costing me everything for 7 long years, and at some point, the fear of an answer has to become smaller than the exhaustion of never asking. I do not know what you will find if you go looking for your own Sarah, whoever that person may be for you. I cannot promise you it will be an easy thing to find, but I can tell you, with my whole heart, that the not knowing is its own kind of grief, quieter than the other kind, but no less heavy for being quiet, and that even a broken heart, once it finally knows the truth, can begin slowly the real work of healing. In a way, a heart still guessing never fully can. I think of Louise often still, sitting behind that same desk, helping some other frightened, unsteady person type their very first search into that little glowing box, never knowing which of those searches might turn out to be the one that changes an entire family's life, the way mine changed ours. I think of my mother, holding that small wooden frame against her chest in a stranger's parking lot. I think of Sarah, laughing outside a hospital in a photograph I will carry with me for the rest of my days. A woman who lived a whole beautiful life I only got to meet after it had already ended, and who, it turns out, never once stopped carrying us with her, all the way to the very end. Before you go, I want to ask you one more time, please, to do the small things that help a story like mine find its way to more people who might need to hear it. Press that like button. Leave me a comment and tell me where in the world you are watching this from tonight, because I read every single one, and it means more to an old woman like me than you would ever guess, to know how far a story from a quiet farmhouse in Pennsylvania has managed to travel. And if this is the first time you have sat with me like this, subscribe so that you do not miss the next time I sit down on this porch and tell you another piece of my life, because I promise you, there are many more Tuesdays like that one, many more doors I have walked through since, and I would be honored, truly honored, to have you walk through them with me. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. Go on now, and hold the people you love a little closer, while you still have the chance to.